Hey everyone, today I want to talk about the rest of the Marvel movies back in the earlier 80s and 90s and the 2000s. The ones that never want to talk about. Well, for me, I do want to talk about the rest of the Marvel movies back then in the way beginning. How Marvel Comics did start making a movie instead. Well, the only thing that they haven't talked about these movies back then, that most of them got too lame and most of them are just too tired to tell them how these great movies turn out to be instead, okay? Well, first of all, I love these movies, so they should have a connection between the MCU movies instead, okay? First off, Howard the Duck came out in 1986 movie. Well, I know Howard the Duck did turn out to be a classic Marvel movie. Well, and of course, and you watch it ahead instead, how this movie came along, just all these characters from Marvel instead. And I know Howard the Duck is from Marvel instead. And we know that in the 1980 he was abducted again. So how he got abducted? Simple, by the Collector, of course. You don't know who the Collector is? He's a different character from Marvel instead. Just like Peter Quill, who got abducted in the 80s. Just like Howard the Duck instead. Well, I don't know. It did happen. You know that? But anyway, let's move on. And let's move on to the 90s now, you guys, okay? I know that was the first Marvel movie, but the rest of the movies from the Incredible Hulk and Thor from the 1980s, well, we're going to leave them alone instead. So we're going to have involvement connection in these movies, of course. It has to do with a connection. So, make this up whatever. For me, I'm going to make this up from the MCU instead, okay? I got some classic MCU ones from the earlier 80s and 90s and 2000s, of course. So, don't worry. I'm going to make this up. The movie that I was going to do a review is Nick Fury. Well, let me tell you something. This is the original Nick Fury from to the 90s, of course. Who stars as David Hasselhoff? Well, it's kind of a classic from where this came from. Oh, simple. 1997? Well, that wasn't that long. I feel the Fury instead? Well, I know this is not Natasha. That's not the Black Widow, of course. That should be an agent now, okay? And we know that's Nick Fury's assistant, that how she was instead, before the other African-American Nick Fury just came along. This should be the original Nick Fury from the earlier 90s. But we know in the Winter Soldier, he visited his graveyard instead. So this should be Nick Fury that we should know, the original guy instead. Not the one from that who starts as Samuel L. Jackson, but we respect him instead. We know that he does it great as Nick Fury, of course, from S.H.I.E.L.D., from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So, definitely put him in there instead, of course. And definitely, I do have Captain Marvel back then from the earlier 90s, of course. So, I do have it on Google+, but you can watch it on Disney+, wherever you want instead. And for starters, I do have the first Blade movies and the DVD Blade 2 and Blade Trilogy. This is the third final Blade movie. Well, it was a blockbuster video, so I bought these. And good price, of course. Let me tell you something. These Blade movies do have a connection between earlier 1990s and the 2000s, of course. Because he, you know that who stars as Wesley Snipes? He does make a great character as Blade, of course. He's the vampire hunter who hunts vampires, of course. I know he's half vampire and half human, so he's not gonna age that much. He's definitely immortal, of course. And he's hunting down these vampires, so it's not gonna wipe out any human race, of course. He's gonna do that by killing them, of course. And we know he's a killer and a vigilante, of course. And don't forget, they're still making that movie Morbius, of course. Morbius, he is another vigilante, of course, but he's a vampire. Just like SpiderMan, of course. Well, that's another one from the 90s. And here, we're gonna pass by the 2000s now. Well, I'm gonna tell you something. This came out in 2003. This is called Hulk instead. They don't have to name it or anything. Just name Hulk. You should name Hulk 1, of course. That should make sense. We know that Bruce Banner, who starts in the beginning, how gamma radiation started in the way beginning, how this all started in the laboratory, of course. He did have an experiment, and look how he turned out to be the Green Hulk, of course. And we'll get into the bottom line of the Incredible Hulk, who versus the Abomination, of course. But we're not gonna get into that. We're gonna get into the 2000s, of course. Right now, I'm gonna put this in the MCU, so this one takes a cake from it because Bruce Banner, in the end, he disappears, and then suddenly he gets to South America, of course. Where? Simple. He runs away from the government, of course. And he runs away from a general, of course, who starts as the Green Hulk, as the Red Hulk, of course. But we don't know how's that gonna fit in. So they're gonna keep up on making more Hulk movies and She-Hulk, of course. So this is a good one. I'm gonna put this up in the MCU, of course. People can make this up. I don't care. And of course in the 2000s, Daredevil. Well, this story makes sense about this, of course, because who starts as Ben Affleck and Jennifer Garner. You know they dated in real life, and then they had kids, of course. And then finally, they did happy ever after, of course. These two met each other in the movie Daredevil, of course. In the story, it involves against the Kingpin, of course. And don't forget this other character named Bullseye. He always hits the target straight. So in the middle part of the movie, Bullseye kills Electro, of course. And that's sad about it. But don't worry, in the comics she gets resurrected instead. And of course, don't forget, they made another second one called Electro, of course. This is probably her own origin story, and then it follows along in the story, of course, fighting ninjas. And of course, she died in the movie Daredevil, and then she got resurrected back. Now, I'm glad I'm showing you guys that you can do whatever you want just to make these movies to make sense of it instead. And of course, I'm not gonna involve these Spider-Man movies from the 2000s. Who starts as Tony McGuire? Well, let me tell you something. My friend says that the Spider-Man 3 on the 2000s kind of suck. I'm not gonna put these up in the MCU. Forget about them. Of course, who starts as Tom Holland? Well, he does make a great Spider-Man movie. Okay. We're going to put him in the picture, of course. And from the 2000s, this is the Punisher, of course. Well, who starts as John... this guy who starts as John Volta as Howard Saint, as Thomas J, of course, as the Punisher. Well, I'm going to put this review story, so this is going to be put in the Marvel movies, of course. And let me tell you something. The Punisher was born in the 2000s, of course, as the origin of Frank Castle, of course. And don't forget, the ones that don't make sense, Punisher Warzone, I'm not going to put that up. The only thing is, it kind of sucks by watching a movie. What I'm watching, a comic or a movie? Well, it makes sense. You're watching an MCU movie. This should be an MCU movie, okay? Well, just make that up. Whatever. And of course, don't forget the 4 characters call themselves the Fantastic Four. Let me tell you something. The Fantastic Four does make sense, so this movie should make sense about that. Not the remake of the Fantastic Four from 2015. I didn't like seeing that movie. It's kind of crappy, of course. Just throw that thing in the garbage. So I like the original Fantastic Four, so this makes a piece of cake on the MCU, of course. And a second, Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. Let me tell you something. this does make sense about that too. It gets involved with Galactus and the Silver Surfer, of course, and Doctor Doom, that he survived, of course. So they will make a Fantastic Four on the MCU movies, of course, put them together. That's all. And definitely, in the 2000s, they did make the movie Ghost Rider. So this makes sense how Ghost Rider is fighting against Blackheart and the rest of those demons, of course. And I tell you, this makes an MCU movie, of course. And they did make Ghost Rider 2, so it's on the internet now on Disney Plus. Well, it's not gonna be in Disney Plus, so well, let's see if they put it on Disney Plus or on Tubi, of course. So I have to find it instead. These two movies, of course, from Ghost Rider, of course, and Marvel's Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. should be in the MCU, of course. Definitely. And then the storyline comes in. You know the rest. The first Iron Man on the MCU and the Incredible Hulk. Let me tell you something. These two movies like that should belong together. They should make sense out of this. Why they don't make sense out of it? Simple. They don't care about how the Incredible Hulk started or whatever it is. Guess what? This should be the first one in 2003, and this one should be in when he runs against the law, of course. He went to South America and Brazil, of course, when hiding. So, make these movies sense. Oh, I don't care about the Spider-Man movies. I care about the original movies like these in the 2000s, of course. She'll make sense out of that, and that's it. Well, you can put whatever you want. So until then, take care. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and lay down and just relax. I had too much experience about dealing with movies in the MCU, of course. This is my idea how to make sense out of this. Well, guess what? Make your own sense out of it too, you guys. Until then, take care.